Entropy. It's the natural order of things falling apart. Systems unraveling, defenses weakening, chaos creeping in. In cybersecurity, we don't fight entropy, we chase after it. I'm Dave Lewis, Global Advisory CISO here at 1Password, and this is the Chasing Entropy podcast, where we peel back the layers of our digital lives and reveal the human decisions, systematic cracks, and overlooked patterns that put everything at risk. From boardrooms to breach reports, 0 days to zero trust, we're chasing the questions that keep security leaders awake at night and stories that don't make the headlines. No hype, no FUD, just real talk with minds shaping the front lines of security. With me this week is Matt Johansen. Matt, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Like I said when we were getting ready, it's not like we've done this a million times, so.
I know, right? And for our listeners to be quite succinct on this point, Matt and I did the Liquid Matrix podcast for, what, 200 plus episodes or something like that?
Something like that. We
Yeah.
counted in hex, so I never remember what the heck episode number we ended up on, but yeah,
I
triple
love
digits.
Jamie. I love Jamie to death, but counting in hex drove me absolutely up a wall because I could never keep it straight in my head.
Yeah. Episode 0F was a good one, yeah.
So we've known each other for quite a long time now. And my curiosity and what I like to ask everybody that I have on the show is, where did you begin? What was it that started this all off for you on your journey to where you are now?
Well, Dave, you were there. Of
Really?
all the people that I've told this story to, you had quite the front row seat to my early career for sure. So,
Actually,
um,
the same pew, if I remember correctly.
yeah, same pew, same pew. Yeah, you're being literal. I forgot you're being literal. I thought you were making a joke. No, yeah. There was a pew involved. So, so yeah, to tell that story, to fill the listeners in on the pew joke. So I went to college for computer science, but in a day when computer science degrees, especially at my little university, had like no cybersecurity content whatsoever. I was learning, Java and Fortran and C and all this kind of crap, right? And so yeah, at the very end of my college career, I knew I wanted to get into cybersecurity. I had some uncles that worked security at the United Nations. And well, one uncle in security and one uncle in IT. And when I say security, I mean physical, like he had the earpiece standing behind the Pope kind of thing. And then I had another uncle in IT, and they asked around when I was like coming of age, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was always technical. I, built my own computers growing up and all this kind of stuff. And they asked around the IT department at the UN, and someone mentioned cybersecurity. And that was always an earworm in my head back in like middle school. So I was like, oh, I'm going to try to do cybersecurity, whatever. I didn't even know what that was, but I'm going to try to do it. And then, yeah, like late in college, the very last semester of my university, like my time at university, was the very first time that my university offered a cybersecurity like senior seminar with they hired a CISO for the university. He happened to have a PhD, so they let him adjunct. And the very first time that he adjunct was my last semester there, so kind of kismet. And one of the things that I'll be forever grateful for is that professor. He could tell that I was like the one. There was only like 9 of us in the class, and I was like the front of the room late at night. It like in the lab, he would set up like CTFs for us, and I was like, he was looking at the logs, and he'd be like, "Man, you were in the lab until 3 o'clock in the morning last night." And I'm like, "Yep." But one of the things that he did was he handed me a DVD of a talk from The Last Hope. Dating myself that he couldn't send me a link on YouTube. He had to hand me a physical piece of media to give me a conference talk. But he handed me a disc, a DVD, and it was of James Arlen giving a talk at The Last Hope called Black Hat to Black Suit. And it was kind of a
That's the one. Yeah.
career advice talk that our friend James Arlen gave. And then the other thing the professor did was like, hey, why don't you join this new site called Twitter and this other new site called LinkedIn and just like reach out to these people. And I did. And I just like injected myself into the conversation as like a 21-year-old kid in the dorm rooms trying to break into the industry. And some of the people that I injected myself into were you and James and a lot of our still friends. And I talked my way into a few conferences and sat in a literal church with the pews pushed aside next to you and Jamie talking about how the heck I was too dumb to even understand the words coming out of either of your mouth at the time. But boy, did I listen. And my goal, I was like cringing. I was like, I do not know what they're talking about. I was too dumb to even ask questions. And like that first conference, I like walked away being like, I got to learn enough to know what they're saying when they answer my questions. So yeah, you guys gave me some of my first early contracts too. Between
I
you
think that
letting me
was more
write.
Jamie than me, actually, because I didn't
Well,
have the
you
same sort of reach that he did.
you let me write for Liquid Matrix, the blog, and do the
Sure.
podcast. And Jamie gave me some contracts to kind of write policies for some nonprofits that he was volunteering for. So yeah, that was it. That was like some of my very very early days of cybersecurity. Was just forcing my way into the room, meeting the right people, and I can actually trace back to like that very first year of me being on Twitter. Every single boss that I've like been hired by in my entire career, I met in my first 6 months on Twitter and IRC and LinkedIn back then. But whether it was Jeremiah Grossman at White Hat, Ali Miller was the CISO of Reddit. Like everyone that I've worked for. Chris Hoff was brought me over to B of A. Like like everyone I've worked for has was a part of that early crew. So
That it was a pretty amazing inflection point in cybersecurity overall when, Twitter and LinkedIn all kicked off back when Twitter was actually, fun to be on. And it was amazing to meet all of these folks, especially through the Security Twits organization that, well, for want of a better term, organization, collection of miscreants that Jennifer Leggio pulled together. And it was really, really cool to be able to build out that base. And very much to what you're saying is just like being able to still be in touch with so many of these people. And how we all went from being in the trenches to nowadays we're all in, senior security roles across the industry. It's kind of wild to see how things have changed. Now, along the
yeah.
road there, you have been in small shops, you've been in bigger shops like White Hat Security and really big shops like Reddit. How has that really shaped your perspective when we're talking about in terms of risk? When you see all these different organizations, all these different experiences you've had, risk is something that I find that is a conversation that we need to have more of across the board. And how has that helped to shape your view of it?
Yeah, yeah, it's such a good question. So I've I've like you said, I've seen such varying degrees of it. A lot of my early career was like on the vendor side, offensive security side of things, where we're just there to like hack into other people. There's not as much of like an organization, monstrosity as there is like if you're a publicly traded entity with regulations and stuff. If you're a vendor, you're just kind of like doing what you got to do to sling SaaS or whatever it is until you get to a certain size. Um, and then I flipped onto the defensive side of things. I was the head of security for a fintech shop called Honest Dollar that Goldman Sachs wound up acquiring. And that transition for me, it kind of encapsulates your entire question. I was employee number something teen at Honest Dollar, sitting at a WeWork, one of the first WeWorks in Austin. And our IT department was, that guy that bought the laptops, right? That also did some other stuff, right? There was no IT department. It was kind of like, here's your MacBook and a pat on the ass, right? And like just have fun, right? And then like I got there and the firewall rules in Google Cloud were, SSH to the internet, like into prod was like how these guys were getting
Boy,
into
is that a bad thing?
into prod, right? And so, okay, I had to like build a security program from the ground up there and kind of make a lot of those risk decisions while not hampering a 20-person startup. And then we get acquired by Goldman, and it took us 2 weeks to get back into prod from the day of the acquisition, because we had to like Google Cloud was banned globally at Goldman, and forget our MacBooks, throw our MacBooks in the trash. You had like a virtual computer, you didn't even have a laptop, right? Like
Oh,
Goldman was the
wow.
complete other side of the risk spectrum, right? And they took everything very 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 seriously with good reason. um, and basically, if you could draw a line of like, hey, you need to do all security things correctly, no exceptions, The banks are on that far right of things, right? They do not care how much they're slowing or inconveniencing their employees for the sake of security, which is like the trade-offs that every other organization makes. If you're talking about big global banks, they're like, nope, don't care that you have to carry an RSA token and you have to type in your two-factor thing, and we're not even going to give you a laptop. You're going to have to like Citrix into this machine so that we can control it, and you can't walk out with stuff that you plugged a USB drive into your laptop and like walk out. It's like, nope, like whatever. So that they made all those trade-offs so hard. So, I mean, we had to navigate those processes as a 20-person fintech startup in Austin that, 48 hours previously we're running around with our MacBooks doing whatever we wanted, to, hey, here's your Windows machine, that you're Citrixing into. Forget Gmail. Like, you're never seeing that again. And like, oh, you want to SSH into prod? Well, that's blocked. Like, we were running our Kubernetes commands and just hitting every URL that was blocked, and Goldman had to unblock them one by one. There was no like, oh, those guys in Austin get to go to Google Cloud. Like, there was no universal asterisk, like, let these guys do what they want. It was like, you had to go through the process and like, get this unblocked. So,
Wow.
I mean, the
How
spectrum
long
is
did
just
that
very,
take?
very wide. It took us 2 weeks to get back to prod. It was wild.
Oh my goodness,
It was
that's
wild.
surreal.
Yeah, there
But
was
that's one of those
no.
really. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying there was no exception. It was not like, oh yeah, we acquired this startup, so they get to do something special. It's like, nope, like, you're on the network, so you have to play by the network's rules.
So that's a really interesting thing because it really highlights the differences between the small and large organizations. With small organizations, is grip it and rip it, get things done. But when you have that sort of mentality, that sort of culture, that really does lead to, for one of a better term, rather, shadow IT projects. And when I say shadow IT project, I don't mean that as a negative. It's just organizations or groups within an organization trying to get things done. But unfortunately, that tends to cause all sorts of problems. And when we look at it from the enterprise lens of the larger organizations, it is kind of wild to see how often this sort of, the answer is no, and what flavor would you like it in, to the fact that, oh, wait, shadow IT still exists in these large enterprises. Because I've had so many enterprises over the years say, oh, no, we don't have that problem. And when realistically, they actually do. So do you think that approach that they had, and that's not to pick on them in specific, like organizations in general, that sort of, our way or the highway, do you think that actually helps reduce the risk in the organization, or does it cause more problems by forcing dynamic teams to try and find ways around it?
No, it definitely helps on the risk side. It's the right, like, they are doing the right thing for security, like 100%. I talked to Chris Hoff, like we mentioned Chris Hoff already. I talked to him about a lot about this, because he had to do this at B of A, and he talks about how Bank of America had zero malware in a calendar year, and everyone laughed and was like, "Oh, that you know of?" He's like, "No, like, we had zero malware, and like, this is how." And like, the answer how there was crazy, right? It was not just cost prohibitive for other organizations, right? But like you said, like, workflow, like, prohibitive was like, but you're talking about one of the largest financial institutions on the planet, that malware would be devastating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I ran a portion of security at Reddit. If Reddit went down, and it did frequently, people's paychecks still cleared, right? Like,
That's important.
so when but when you're comparing that to some of the big banks, where it's like, if they had a massive ransomware outbreak, it's critical infrastructure, right?
Mm-hmm.
People don't feed their kids if the banks go down for too long. And it's a very different conversation. And so, yeah, when you say, are they doing the right thing? Yeah, like, that's the right decision for that organization. Is that the right decision for every organization? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
And with the shadow IT stuff, it's like, yeah, of course, like you mentioned, like, allowing dynamic teams to do something, and they're gonna have to find ways around it. It's like, well, the trick is, do you have dynamic teams like that are able to move and operate that fast? That's the cost of a lot of this, is like, you just stifle the ability to operate at like a speed of, if you went to a startup shop, like what you would see happen at a smaller shop. Is like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, the speed that happens there is breakneck compared to global institutions.
it really does throw a spanner into the innovation for sure. And
Hmm.
when we take that and we look at how the industry has its ebbs and flows, like I remember when cloud was first a big thing, and I was at RSA conference, and somebody had, well, they had a stand for one company that was cloud something or other. I can't remember the name. But after questioning them for about 10 minutes, they finally admitted that their product had nothing to do with cloud. And it was really amazing. They had just done it because they were trying to get attention of VC funding. And now we flash forward to today, and not so much the shadow IT piece, but we're now getting into all the talk about non-human identities and agentic AI. I worry that in a lot of ways that we're getting so far ahead of our skis, and I mean that as an industry, of looking at these solutions and deploying them without taking into account security. Like if you look back to the advent of the internet, when that was created, Scott Bradner, I was very fortunate to have him as a professor during my grad work. His name's on all the first RFCs. And he said quite candidly, security was never part of the equation. I'm worried that we're going to see that from a risk perspective, where we're seeing these systems that are being deployed that are not taking into account this sort of risk management. Do you see a similar type of potential for us?
Yeah, I'll even pick on a word that you used a few times there, which is deploy, which, like, the modern sense of deployment isn't even the traditional sense of deployment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Deploy brings to mind shops that you and I have worked at where you had to deploy software into an internal network, right? And it's very like, here's the perimeter, and we have to install this, agent or whatever it is across things in the DMZ or across the endpoint fleet. That's just not what shops look like a lot these days, right? It's a MacBook and a 200 SaaS apps and Slack and Gmail, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, what is deploying Workday look like? What does deploying, Rippling look like? It looks like handing out a bunch of accounts. Like, there is no deployment, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's in the traditional sense, we've lost a lot of control and visibility from a security standpoint with this whole move to SaaS. And yeah, we're even seeing the threat actors catch up to that, which, instead of deploying malware, like, which of course they still do, the malware is still
Oh
a
yeah,
big
but
problem.
that won't go away.
But instead of focusing on malware, a lot of threat actors are transitioning to just stealing OAuth tokens,
Mm-hmm.
just stealing credentials. If you can phish a set of Okta credentials and bypass two-factor auth, why deploy malware? You now have 200 tiles in Okta that you can click on that lets you into every SaaS app, behind that set of credentials. And that's what we're seeing, threats like Scattered Spider focus on. They're not a malware shop, and they're one of the most successful threat actors of the past couple of years. They're not deploying malware. They're just
Exactly.
grabbing OAuth tokens and then turning around and doing whatever. I saw someone say identity is the new malware, right? It's like, it's just, well, what? Well, why? Just log in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think that's a huge consideration right now. I mean, we just saw it in our government, right? This telemessage in the U.S. government. I know you're sitting in Canada. The U.S. government just saw telemessage. It's a fork of Signal and WhatsApp and Telegram. Like, telemessage just forked these things to allow agencies or companies that have regulatory requirements to archive messages.
Yeah.
This telemessage thing was archiving Signal messages that government entities were like taking part in, but this telemessage app was incredibly insecure. It was hard coded creds, and like it got hacked, of course. And luckily, the hacker just told reporters about it and didn't monitor these communications for a bunch of
That's
the
lucky, as
time.
far as we know.
But yeah, but like, exactly. But I mean, so there you have an example of like heavily regulated industries that are still, you know, they're trying to play ball, and they're still, using some app that is not taking security into consideration during the deployment, like you said.
And that's one of those frustrating things that keeps me up at night. And it really does play into the question of the mental health aspect, because when we're dealing with security practitioners, the underlying factor of any security program is the human element. And as defenders, we tend to be overworked and stressed out at the best of times, but a lot of us thrive on that, but not always. And I myself, I mean, I've spent the last 2 years in therapy, and it's been fantastic for me. It's one of those things where I always advocate, if people have the ability to reach out for help, do so, because there are people out there, services out there that can help. But you yourself have been very vocal on this particular topic as well. And what do you think the industry, and when I say industry, I mean cybersecurity in general, gets wrong about this always on hero mentality that we seem to have historically thrived upon?
Yeah, I really like the last way you put that. I've actually written a whole blog about avoiding superhero culture. Because I think every shop that I've worked at has that superhero on the team that, like, when things go wrong, everyone looks to that one person, no matter what, no matter who's on call, no matter whose job it is to like answer the page right now, you still wind up calling like a very short list of people, even if it's not one person, right? If it's like a few people of like, oh, well, they know where all the bodies are buried. They've got the access. They can do this much faster than me and whatever. And yeah, you're just burning those people out, right? I've seen those people churn. I've unfortunately seen those people end their lives. I've unfortunately seen those people fall to addiction. I mean, it's just it's an unsustainable pace, right? To like carry that much stuff on your shoulder for that long. And so avoiding superhero culture, like if you're in leadership, that's like a watch item, right? It's like you can't have those single points of failure for a high pressure job like cybersecurity, right? When those pages come in at 1 o'clock in the morning, you have an on-call rotation for a reason, right? And you monitor that closely. Who got paged at 1 o'clock in the morning? Do they get a day off this week because they were up last night, right? Like, this is all leadership has to focus on this, right? Instead of just milking every ounce of effort out of the teams. Incident response by far is the most critical place that you have to focus on this, because you're talking about pressure, right? You're literally getting woken up, and you have to decide in that moment, are we being hacked right now or not, or is this just another alert or whatever it is? And then you have to respond, right? I've responded to incidents a number of times from some of the threat actors that you all read news about, and I've slept 2 hours a night for 5 days, right, to try to catch up with this stuff. It's a crazy job. So leaders need to look at that and go, force some time off. Don't unlimited. Don't like Silicon Valley unlimited time off your way through it. You have to look at your team and say, okay, hey, you are currently operating at an unsustainable rate. You have the next 2 weeks off, like non-negotiable, right? Like, go get out, right? This is stuff that I've tried to focus on in my career for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really a salient point, because I've been through that as well. I've had the unfortunate thing of burning out twice myself. Thankfully, I was able to recover from that. But you're right; we have lost too many friends along the way to this sort of thing. Now, you talk about industry leaders needing to focus on these sort of things. What do you think leaders can actively do to create a culture that prioritizes mental health? Like, I've been very fortunate that I've gone through Duo Security and now 1Password, where they do focus on that a great deal, and it's fantastic to see. But I've also been in places where that wasn't even on the menu.
Yeah, so I'm kind of critical of how like a lot of like people, uh, you know, have a mental health like positive culture, and a lot of times, and you see people like sing it from the rooftops that they're like, oh well, we give the Calm app to all of our people, and my thing always is like, hey, you can't like yoga your way out of a crazy high stress job, right? Like I've gone through a lot of different therapists in my life, and sometimes you get on with some of these people and they're like, well, did you try going for a walk? And I was like, I am having panic attacks and PTSD symptoms. Like, you're not going to breath work your way through trauma, right? You're not going to like meditate your way through. All of these are good tools. I don't want to like diminish meditation or yoga or breath work or exercise. Like, it's all super, it's part of the ecosystem of taking care of yourself. But
Mm-hmm.
like, it really comes down to like stress management and like time management and all this kind of stuff of like, if you are understaffed and underpaying people and overworking people, I do not care that you give them the Calm app subscription. Like, that's not a push and pull that is going to equal like a good mental health outcome, right?
Yeah.
So I actually just did a podcast interview with a neuroscience, like a professor of neuroscience and someone who does neuroscientist, who was talking when we were talking about alert fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And he had written a lot of papers about things that are like alert fatigue. He wasn't focused on cybersecurity when he was doing his research, but the exact same thing, right? Doing a repetitive task for too long, um, and the neuroscience behind how like certain parts of your brain shut off when you're doing this kind of stuff, and in a high stress environment, and doing all this other things. I learned a lot from that conversation. Maybe we can link it in the show notes
For
for
sure.
this. But one of the things that he honed in on that I took away from it was um, context switching is really helpful. So like if you're trying to create a culture that's mental health positive, one of the things to do is to like not grind someone into the ground on a single task for too long, right? Like have them switch projects, have them switch things throughout their day, throughout their week, so that it's
Mm-hmm.
not like you're not running at a burnout pace doing the same thing for too long, especially in the SOC. You can imagine that, right? The alert
I've
wall, the
been
alert
there.
triage, bug bounty triage is really like, oh my God, it's repetitive and kind of crazy. So being able to rotate people in and out of tasks was super important. And then the other major thing that he focused on was like your physical health, like sleep and exercise and diet and nutrition. And it's like, well, from an organization, you can't like mandate diet and exercise on people, but it was super interesting to me to like focus on your team's physical health and sleep quality. And I can definitely echo that for my own mental health journey and issues. Is like, yeah, I know weeks where I'm like eating right and I'm in the gym and I like go walk in between meetings and all this kind of stuff. I'm in like a completely different headspace than weeks where I'm like locked in this room for too long or not sleeping right because I stayed up too late coding on something or whatever it is. Completely different mental health weeks for me. So I don't know. Could you do walking one-on-ones as a manager? Could you, like, if you're ordering food for a team lunch, maybe skip the pizza easy button, like try to maybe focus on like your team's overall like holistic picture of their health and their quality of life instead of just like, hey, did you try to meditate your way through that? It's just not it's just not going to work.
Nice. Love it. So when we look at the breadth and depth of our conversation as we've been going along here, I'm pulled back to the beginning of the conversation when you were talking about how you started off, collecting links for the Liquid Matrix and all the rest of it and writing articles there. You've taken that sort of approach and created your own thing. So at the beginning, I just introduced you as Matt. I didn't say where you're working. Could you give us an idea as to what you're doing now in this rather amazing project?
Yeah, it's super funny to give everyone a kind of a peek. So I run a cybersecurity media organization called Vulnerable You. We run a newsletter. We also have an agency that helps cybersecurity companies with their technical blogs, white papers, social media, website, SEO type stuff. So I've kind of got the agency side of things, helping companies, and then I've got the Vulnerable You newsletter and my YouTube and my Instagram and TikTok. Believe it or not, like I'm doing really well on Instagram and TikTok, making cybersecurity current events topics. And
Nice.
Dave and I are laughing because literally one of the first things I did in the industry was Dave ran this blog, Liquid Matrix Security Digest. It was blogs and musings from Dave and a few other people. But one of the things that we did was like a daily news roundup because like it didn't really exist. News consumption looked a whole lot different 18 years ago, right?
Oh
And so we all read a lot of blogs. Google Reader, may it rest in peace. I miss it dearly.
Oh, I always love them.
And a lot of us would read a lot of blogs and writing of journalists that are friends of ours still. And it's not like the Washington Post had a cybersecurity column at the time. It's not like TechCrunch really existed. It's not like 404 Media is doing awesome stuff. They didn't exist, right? And so in order to pull cybersecurity news out of the ether, it kind of helped for us at Liquid Matrix to kind of pull together like a dozen or so links from around the web, different mailing lists, right? What's that one?
Oh,
The
Security
zero,
Focus was one.
yeah, and then the 0 day one that's still around, like pops around. But it's
Yeah.
like IRC. It's like people talking about 0 days in IRC, or people on this email thread, or some early version of Hacker News existed, right? And like these forums, and I would kind of go and gather a lot of the news and put it together on Liquid Matrix over 18 years ago.
Yeah.
And I find it funny that now here I am and my full-time gig is still talking about infosec current events. So yeah, you can check it out, vulnu.com. Like vulnerable u is the letter u is my company. So VULN, the letter u, .com is the newsletter.
I'll
And
make sure I
then
put it in the show notes for you.
yeah, thanks. And then yeah, I'm focusing a lot. Right before this, I recorded a YouTube video, so I'm putting out kind of longer YouTube kind of deep dives into current events, but kind of trying to zoom out a little bit. So like right now, there's this big click fix campaign going on with some Russian threat actors that Google put out some threat intel about. So I went into the threat intel report, but I wanted to kind of do an overview of why click fix is gaining popularity right now and how people can protect against it. So that's kind of how I'm using the YouTube. And
That's
then
awesome.
and then Instagram is taking off. Instagram and TikTok, people love these little 90-second like clips of security content. So yeah, I'm doing a lot of those too.
It's funny. I have to admit, I've never wrapped my head around Instagram. My wife uses it extensively for her company, but it's one of those things where it's just like I haven't quite got it, but I see your stuff and you're just doing fantastic. So it's fun to watch that.
I
Now
mean,
we
like you,
oh, go ahead.
sorry, like you said, we did 200 some odd podcasts talking about security current events. I've it a lot of practice talking about security current events. So I just happen to be the one who figured out to do it in 90 seconds and put it on Instagram, and and it does well. So
Perfect. So so we've talked about all sorts of things. We talked about how you got into the industry. We talked about mental health. We talked about shadow IT, agentic AI, security in general. When we talk about these elements and you put them all together, what do you see as the number one security issue that you worry about yourself that isn't really being addressed?
oh, good question. I'd say I think we were talking a little bit even before we were recording. The identity stuff is super prevalent right now. I think that's where a lot of threat actors are moving, right? And I think that's one of the areas that's hardest for even a security minded person to control, right? Like you even saw Troy Hunt get popped a few weeks ago to a
All
very
right.
clever phishing attack, right? And talk about a security minded person. And I'm really glad that he's been super transparent about how he got caught, and he was on family vacation and he was worried about something going on with MailChimp, and he got a MailChimp phishing email and he got popped, right? So that's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night because there's only so much that we can control, right? And I think I really, really, really hate this thing that we've done in the security industry of like making it people feel bad for clicking on links and clicking on things, right? It's like, no, that's what the internet is for, is sharing links and clicking on links. That's what, like,
Quite literally.
telling people to not open an email is not useful security advice, right? Email is meant to be opened. Email is meant to be sent. You're supposed to send people links and they're supposed to click them.
Mhm.
That's what we all do all day, telling people like there used to be stickers that said "Don't click crap" or whatever it was, right? That like security people would hand out and think it was funny. And I'm sure that you and I and Jamie, I'm sure we've made light of this kind of stuff in podcast episodes in the
Oh,
past
more than
too. But
likely, yes.
I am coming around to hating that narrative, and so that to answer your question, that kind of stuff is it is on us as a security industry to figure out how to make that not be the advice, right?
Yeah.
Clicking links should be safe. What do we have to
Don't
do to make clicking links safe?
exactly. Don't vilify the users. That's a
Yeah,
really key piece there. All right.
yeah.
So, one last question before we wrap it up here. What's the one piece of advice you give somebody that's starting out in security today? Because I always get this question. I know friends always get this question. I'm sure you get this one. What's that one piece that you would give if you had just a moment to say it?
All right. So I won't give the generic advice because other people will say the generic stuff. Just network, like do all the things that I said how I got in my career. Get yourself on the social networks, get yourself to the conferences, introduce yourself to people, act like you belong in the room, and like just start meeting with people. You're going to get jobs by meeting people, not by like throwing resumes into piles, right? So go meet people, and that's the obvious advice. But the piece of advice that I think I am one of the only, not the only people, but I tend to give this advice, and people kind of scratch their head at me and all this kind of stuff is create content. Like just do whatever you're doing, do it publicly. A lot of times I speak to people early in their career that say, well, I don't know what I'm talking about, so I can't, therefore I should not be talking publicly because I'm a student or whatever, right? For whatever reason, I've never had that bug in my head. and I came out of the womb and haven't shut up, right? And so it's not confidence, like, because I get on here and I'm just like obviously an idiot, right? But
Gee.
I can pull up the Wayback Machine of the blogs that I was writing on my personal blog when you were letting me write on Liquid Matrix under the security intern moniker. I was writing stuff on mattjsecurity.com or something, some early domain that I had.
Oh, right.
And the blogs that I wrote were like how I was figuring out something that I was figuring out. I was like, I don't know how to do. So there was a thing called Damn Vulnerable Web App. It's still around. It's
Yep,
like a
it
vulnerable
is still
website
around, yeah.
that you could spin up and you can hack on it to practice AppSec hacking because bug bounties didn't exist back then. So if you hacked a real website, you were going to jail. So you had to like set up a purposely vulnerable website to like practice cross-site scripting and SQL injection, all this stuff on. I was too dumb to set up damn vulnerable web. I couldn't even practice hacking because I didn't know how to set up a LAMP stack to get this warning because Docker didn't exist. VMs were new, like,
Very
and so
new.
you had to like be able to hop on a Linux box and like learn the command line of like setting up a LAMP stack to get damn vulnerable web app working. It took me weeks. I was like, okay, if it took me weeks, someone else is having this problem too. And so I wrote the freaking blog of like how to set up the LAMP stack to even start hacking damn vulnerable web app. And people thanked me for it left and right. Anyway, the point being, just make content. Video is king right now. If you can make a YouTube channel about what you're learning, if you can get on, any of the video stuff and just start talking and being human, I can't even describe the doors that is open for me in my career, that I, for some reason, am not afraid to turn my camera and microphone on. And that's why I push everyone to do it.
Well, I'm very glad you're not afraid to do that because you've been doing some amazing work and we all appreciate it. So that brings us to the end of the episode. Matt, thank you so much for putting up with me yet again. It's been a lot of fun, my friend. And thank you to all the listeners for tuning into the Chasing Entropy podcast this week. And also be sure to check out the show notes. We'll put links in for Vulnerable You and all sorts of other things that we mentioned during the show. And have yourself a wonderful rest of your week. And thanks for tuning in. Cheers.